Welcome to the MNSpiritCast. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the MNSpiritCast. So I'm alone tonight. I am riding solo because our other co-hosts had other things to do tonight. So riding solo tonight, but I promise you that we got a good show because we are in the one and only state of West Virginia. The Legend of the Mothman, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, and much more takes place in West Virginia. So, with that being said, actually, we have a pretty cool surprise for you tonight. We are interviewing the one and only SRI Investigations, Spectral Research Investigations. So, everybody, please welcome Brian Clary to the MNSpiritCast.
How's it going, guys?
How's it going, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Good.
So, if anybody notices, right behind him, he's actually at a very special location for the show tonight. Brian, where are you tonight?
So I am broadcasting from outside of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia, kind of north-central West Virginia. Built in 1858, designed for 250 people, held well over 3,000 people at one given time. One of the most famous locations in the state. Well, it's absolutely the most famous location in the state of West Virginia, and amongst the most famous locations in the nation, and in some cases the world. Very, very, very cool. Old locations, 13 buildings on the complex, dating all the way back to, like I said, the main building that you see behind me started construction in 1858. They were continuously building up until 1881. They took a break. And then there were other buildings that were attached on, including the red one that you can kind of see there in the background. That was a tuberculosis asylum. And if kind of in the back there, it's kind of hard to see, kind of right in the middle. There is an old geriatrics ward, the women's auxiliary building and such. If you're familiar with Project Fear, and those guys and Destination Fear and so on, those buildings will kind of sound familiar to you. There's several other more back there that you can't see.
Oh, wow. So this is a gigantic place, and anybody who's anybody in the paranormal has heard of this building. Mm-hmm. And I can guarantee that it's probably on most of our bucket lists to investigate. Because to be honest, it's, like you said, one of the most haunted, places, not only in West Virginia, but in the United States alone. So getting in there would be a true accomplishment in the books of your investigations. So
absolutely,
that would be awesome. But I'm happy that you were able to go live from this location tonight. It's a cool background. gives a vibe for the show and everything. So it just looks super cool. So I'm happy to have you. Everybody, check out SRI Investigations and go see what they're doing over there. But tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the state of West Virginia and the paranormal alone in the state. We're also going to talk about what SRI stands for and what you guys do with our SRI. So, first of all, let's talk about Spectral Research Investigations. When did you start it, and why did you start it?
So the plan to start SRI actually began, if you want to be technical, about 15 years ago.
Wow.
At the time that I started when I was 15 years old investigating in a small 3-man group with my dad. Now 23 years into the paranormal field, 23 years of experience at this point. There was a period kind of in the middle or early stages where it was very difficult to get attached to some of the long-standing paranormal groups here in the state of West Virginia. There was a lot of territorial ideas. There was a lot of people that were kind of very leery of anybody new. And it came out when I started was kind of right at the height of when paranormal TV was kind of kicking off.
Sure.
So there were a lot of groups that were here in West Virginia, but they weren't exactly the most friendly to new folks that were interested in joining. It was very much click-based. So actually what ended up happening is my little 3-man group that I was a part of kind of faltered for a bit. And we were just kind of doing little things here and there, kind of passing the time, didn't really do a whole lot of investigations for a while. But then in about 2019, I started kind of picturing doing this again and kind of forming my own group and kind of getting together with folks. Well, wouldn't you know it, in 2020, COVID hit. And all of us were basically homebound. I'm a teacher, and I was homebound for well over 2 months. I couldn't go into work, so I'm sitting there. And at one point, they didn't even know what for us to do. So it was kind of like we were just sitting around twiddling our thumbs, so to speak. So the thought process come to my mind where I talked to my wife and I said, you know what? Since I don't have anything else to do at this point, maybe it's my time to actually kind of delve down to this rabbit hole that is starting one of these groups. So in 2020, myself and my co-founder, Teresa Racer Cheshire, who is the founder and writer of Teresa's Haunted History blog. It's very, very well known, kind of on the East Coast. She and I got together and we started forming this group. We trained actually at the TNT area where the Mothman was reportedly from. And the rest is history. Over the last 3 years, my group has expanded quite a bit from Teresa and myself to now we have 9 to 10 investigators at any given point. We have audio, we have videographers, we have investigators, we have myself. I'm a historian. I'm working on my PhD right now. Teresa's a historian as well. So we have kind of got a wide variety of folks in our group and have really kind of embraced the challenge of not only bringing attention to locations like this. This one's well known. West Virginia Penitentiary is well known. Yes. This one is not as well, or there's a lot of them here in the state of West Virginia. West Virginia is very, very unique in that we have a lot of history here, and I know we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay. Very cool. So actually my team has gotten up to 13 people, maybe more at some point. So having all of the different, perspectives and roles for people is definitely a good thing because, each and every person is unique for the team in their own ways. So there's nothing wrong with a big team out there. And there's some people out there that prefer a small team, and that's perfectly fine. It's just based on your perspective and what you want. So, so the state of West Virginia obviously is no stranger to the paranormal. When you talk about the eastern part of the United States, definitely West Virginia would be one with a lot of activity. So now that we talked about how you got started in the field, what was that first experience that made you think, I want to do this. Was there something that triggered your mind telling you that you wanted to be an investigator?
So I started there's a couple kind of little keynote events that have kind of drugged me in this location, or kind of in this direction, I think is a better word for what I was using. So when I started, or when I was growing up, I remember being like 5 or 6 years old, and we used to live in an old parsonage, which was attached to a church, fairly close to where I live now. And I remember little things happening that caught my attention. Doors and stuff like that shutting with really no reason. Usually, even if you're a kid, you can kind of figure out pretty easily from like talking to your parents and whatnot, hey, the windows are open, that's going to cause suction, it's going to shut the doors and things of that nature.
Right.
But also lights flickering on and off that weren't really explainable. Some of those kind of things were kind of my first clue. But then when I got to about the age of 8, one event that I can kind of pull back to, or a couple of events kind of within a very short period of time there.
Sure.
There was a death in my family. It was my great grandmother, who I was pretty close to. And at that time, we were going through the process of cleaning out her house and kind of getting it ready to clean out the estate and stuff like that. And during the day, when we had the electricity off here in Appalachia, it gets hotter than hell in the summer, especially at night and during the mid part of the day. And what we ended up having a lot of in the summertime, you have a lot of these little pop-up storms that come on right in the mid part to later part of the day.
Yeah.
So at this time, there's no electricity in the house. So whenever we wanted to go let the heat out, we had to go open the windows. And then if there was a storm coming, we had to go. Well, one of these days, we had one of these times where we had to go back and shut the windows later in the evening. And this is after she passed away. And I remember going up to the upstairs. I went over with my grandmother. She went to go shut the downstairs windows. And I went upstairs to shut the upstairs windows. And I remember walking upstairs, and there was an old rocking chair kind of pointed at the corner, pointed away from me. And when you got to the top of the stairs of the landing, here was this chair, but here was a lady sitting in it that looked very much like the features that I would have expected to see from my great grandmother. She didn't say anything. She didn't do anything. She was kind of sitting there rocking in this chair. And then it's like I got to the top of the stairs, and I was able to fixate my vision on her for just like a few seconds. And then she just kind of melted away. It wasn't like just disappeared. It was just kind of like a fog had lifted and she was gone.
Wow.
That was one occurrence. Then my dad, after my parents got divorced, I was, I think, 9 years old or so like that at that time. He was an over-the-road truck driver. So I mostly lived with my grandparents because my mother was doing her thing. My dad was an over-the-road truck driver, and I was supposed to be living with him, but I ended up spending most of my time with my grandparents. So on the weekends, though, if my dad was home from over the road, I would go and spend time with him. He lived a little ways away in an old, it was like a 1960s camper that was converted over into a trailer. And it's just a mobile home. So he lived right on the railroad tracks, right next to the Ohio River. You could look right down out the back window and see the Ohio River right below us.
Sure.
And I remember from like an early point going to that house and things like were kind of strange. And I remember like he had a bedroom. He had one bedroom in it. And then there was kind of like this cut that was kind of right between the bathroom and where the laundry room was. And there was no walls, there was no door, so it was kind of a pseudo bedroom. He had a pull-out bed in there. So that was kind of my place to sleep when I was there. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing somebody walking up and down the hallway. But I knew it wasn't him because I could hear him snoring in the other room.
Sure.
So I got kind of a little bit of a feelings from that. Then one night I was staying there, and I've had insomnia since I was a kid. There's periods where I will sleep like a rock. There's times that I can't sleep at all. One of these nights that I had insomnia kicked in really heavily. I ended up going to the TV room and sitting and watching TV. And it was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I remember I was just like this odd kid, and I used to sit around like watching Star Trek and shit like that at night. And I remember watching Star Trek Voyager right in the middle of the night. And I remember it used to have one of these giant windows on the end, and he kept it covered with a flag.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting in there, middle of the night, watching TV, and I hear something start tapping on the glass, and it was a very rhythmic, human-sounding tapping.
Okay.
And at this point, I was a kid, and there was no God's honest way you could have got me to look out the window. But I knew it
Right.
wasn't a bug. I knew it wasn't a bird or anything like that. It was a very deliberate knocking kind of tapping on
Mm-hmm.
this window. And I remember sinking down into the couch, just trying to hide, hoping whatever it was would go away.
Right.
Well, then I think it was my second grade year. I am in a social studies fair at my elementary school. And my dad and I had been putting together a project for the Civil War on the Battle of Chickamauga, Tennessee.
Okay.
So we were putting it all together that weekend for the social studies fair that was to be on the following Monday. And I remember we had did the project all weekend. I had gotten everything together, and Monday he was going to take me to school. Sorry, there's mosquitoes bugging around and it's driving me crazy.
You. Yeah, they're crazy up here too.
Yeah. So he was going to take me to school the next morning. So I got up, got myself kind of together, brushing my teeth, stuff like that. And I stood at the back window, and it had one of those little diamond-shaped back windows that you could kind of look out and you could see right down the river.
Sure.
And I remember noticing somebody walking around on the riverbank, and then that person gradually started moving a little bit quicker and kind of going into a jog. And I told him, I was like, hey, there's somebody down here on the riverbank that I don't know who this is. And I watched this person kind of running, but it was kind of odd that they had kind of a weird gait when they ran, and I couldn't really figure it out. But then I kind of looked closer, and what I noticed was it was kind of like this person didn't have any feet.
Really?
And as soon as I hollered for him, he came back to the door. And by that point, this person had disappeared. The owner of the property had a lot of old junk cars and stuff like that down on the riverbank.
Right.
And it looked like this person had disappeared behind one of those old junk cars. And he asked me to describe him. And I described this person. Well, he told me after this that one night when he was there in the house, he was there alone. And he got in the shower and he got out of the shower. And when he opened the curtain door, here's this person that's dressed the exact same way that I described, with no feet, standing in the bathroom doorway looking at him. And obviously that's probably going to be pretty alarming, to say the least.
Absolutely.
And he freaked out a little bit, but he said that this person just kind of vanished on him. So these are just some of the kind of experiences that kind of drove me this direction.
Wow. And this is when you were, thanks for joining. Appreciate it. And this is when you were a kid. And have you had this type of experience after that, or do you think it was just kind of a spare of the moment type encounter?
I've seen stuff. I think I very much hesitate to call myself like sensitive or anything like that. I might be a little bit. And I've seen stuff for the better part of my life. This building right behind us, I was in here one time, and this was shortly after this building was bought by the current owners. And it was very shortly after it was opened up to the general public. And I think it was just like shortly after like the original ghost hunters went in there. So it was very early on in the cycle. And walked down a hallway in this place on the second floor behind me in this big building, and a little kid ran across the hallway, but there were no kids there with us that night.
Whoa.
And that was in red light. So we were running like red filtered light, and you could see her run across the hallway and disappear. And we could not find her, but there were no kids because you have to be 18 to be in here at night on a private or a public tour. So it was kind of very unique. I've seen a lot of stuff over the years that I've had some occurrences even with SRI that have kind of driven me to like further question and further look at this topic. And
absolutely.
There's a lot of things that have happened that have just kind of kept piquing my interest and kept me coming back for more.
Absolutely. Well, it's always good, to have those experiences because some people don't have any
Hmm.
experiences. But the way I look at it is, it's the fact that you got to do it. You don't necessarily need to catch anything because in the long run, our goal is to prove the existence or to prove if they do exist, even.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it sounds pretty cool, that whole experience in itself.
Hmm.
So, uh, I can see it's getting dark on you, so I'll cut a few of my questions. But considering we're talking about the state of West Virginia tonight, and we are in the fourth season of Minnesota Spiritcast, I want to know, what are four of your bucket list places in West Virginia to investigate?
Is this as if I had never been here before, like for a new
Whether you,
investigator wanting to come in?
I'm gonna say, whether you've been or not, but it would be
Okay.
cool to hear where you would like to go that you've never been. So that's up to you what you want to say.
Okay. So if I were a kind of an investigative team wanting to come into the state of West Virginia,
Uh-huh.
obviously this one right behind me is
Yep.
paramount. Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum fits all the bills in terms of what we want to look for when it comes to a haunted
Sure.
location, with the violence and the crazy stuff that happened inside there. But also, West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville, West Virginia, is a very, very well known location.
Uh-huh.
SRI has a lot of smaller locations that I can heavily recommend to investigators
Absolutely.
that are looking for something that are more kind of on a budget. Old Hospital in
Okay.
College Hill in Williamson as a fairly recent arrival on the kind of paranormal circuit. It was a hospital built
Sure.
in 1928.
Oh wow.
Um, it operated, I think, up until 2014. And then
Okay.
it closed when they built a new one. It was doctors' offices for a long time after the hospital kind of went to the bottom of the hill. But it is a very well-known location. It's kind of come onto the scene here in the last like 2 years, and a lot of
Uh-huh.
investigators, and it's very worth the time. And we've had some crazy experiences there.
For sure.
Um, there's a lot of locations here. There's a little antique shop in Beckley, West Virginia that SRI is really, really fond of. It's called the Deep End Antiques. It was built on a former hotel site. The
Sure.
hotel was a drug den and violent place. A lot of cool, unique, weird things have happened there when we've
Uh-huh.
been there. It's probably one of the more, I would say, hostile locations that
Sure.
I've been
Right.
to, in terms of what is there and how much it kind of holds you at a distance and tries to keep you at a distance.
Right.
The Haymond House, a lot of my team is actually going this weekend. I'm not able to because I'm up here at this conference for the next
Yep.
3 days. And I can't leave my wife with the kids any
Right.
longer. She might lose her mind on me. But a lot of my team is going to the Haymond House in Sutton, West Virginia. And that one's coming onto the scene here very recently as well. It's built in 1894.
Okay.
It was a wealthy attorney's house in Sutton. A lot of paranormal reports attached to the place. It's also just a cool, unique Airbnb type location
Okay.
where you can rent the house for the night. You have showers, which is a miracle when you're a paranormal investigator, but also
Absolutely.
beds to sleep in with linens, not laying on a hospital floor like I've done so many times. It's
Uh-huh.
very, very good in and of itself. There are West Virginia is very unique because we are kind of right in the middle of the old frontier. And the old frontier extended here goes all the way back to the late 1600s, early 1700s in terms of
Uh-huh.
English speaking peoples. Now, thousands of years before that, you have groups like the Adena and the Hopewell that lived on this land. You had Shawnee, Delaware, Mingo,
Uh-huh.
Iroquois, to some degree, some Cherokee, although they mostly used it as a hunting ground. But you
Uh-huh.
have a lot of different unique things. Then, if you're interested more the cryptid side, we have Mothman, which is like 30 miles
Yes.
from my house, the TNT
Mm.
area. Flatwoods Monster here in town, all the Bigfoot sightings and things of that nature. West Virginia is rife with history, paranormal reports
Uh-huh.
that kind of spread the gambit of all these different things.
Sure. Right. Now, you're fairly close to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, aren't you?
I can get there if I leave here. I can get to Gettysburg in about 5 hours.
Oh, so not too far.
No.
Which is another unique thing because all of these old almost ancient experiences and wars and stuff all happen near the state of West Virginia, which I think is fantastic. So
Yeah, West Virginia was central to the Civil War, so we saw all that. We saw Revolutionary War. We saw Lord Dunmore's War in the early 1770s.
Wow.
The Battle of Point Pleasant in 1774, which a lot of historians for years contended was probably the opening salvo of the American Revolution.
Sure.
There's a lot here. You go all the way back to people talk about like Lake Shawnee State Park. I'm actually moving over towards some light so you all can see a little bit better. There's so many cool things, and there's so much history here in this state that a lot of people don't take for granted because there is so much actually here.
Right. Well,
try to get in some light now.
There we go. Perfect. So let's see. When we're talking about SRI, what do you guys specialize in? Is it kind of only that investigation for answers type thing, or do you guys offer cleansings, or is there any certain things that you guys specialize in?
So at this point, we have kind of hitched our cap onto the looking at businesses and like big locations like this.
Absolutely.
Smaller locations and stuff. We don't do residentials at this point. I've ran into too many issues here in Appalachia with drugs and violence, domestic abuse, child abuse and such like that I don't really do a whole lot of residentials. In fact, we've kind of pushed those off. Now, I have done them in the past, but the last one I did was a mess. A lot of signs of things that we as paranormal investigators do not really need to be privy to.
Yes.
So I try to kind of keep away from that. I've done cleansings and stuff before. Part of my heritage is Micmac Indian, or Micmac Native rather. And I've done them before, but I also don't like to give people a false impression. I think a lot of people have a false impression with like cleansings and like spiritual removals that it is 100% going to happen. And I do not like giving folks that like idea, because so often when we do that kind of thing, the stuff will temper down for a couple months and then be right back within, and sometimes even worse than it was before.
Absolutely.
So I think for SRI's part, what we have kind of hitched our cap onto is the historical research element. I mentioned that myself and my co-founder are both historians.
Yep.
A lot of paranormal teams, and even like the big fancy teams with all their fancy equipment, their TV budgets, they outsource their information. They go and they find local historians. They go out and they find different people to come in, and they have a whole crew of people with the task of getting people in to interview and do and all that stuff. We try to keep that within our internals. When it comes to like our historic research, we try to do all of it before we go, because my main thing is I want to know whether a story has any substantiality.
Yes.
I want to know.
That's a big one.
I want to know if, like, we've done Fairfield County Infirmary up in Lancaster, Ohio. That's a famous one, and that's one of my favorite to go to. And Fairfield County Infirmary is an old location, built in 1855, I believe it was. Was the county infirmary, poorhouse, and everything like that. And it was rife with stories of violence and things like that. And there was a story of a lady that caught herself on fire and ended up burning up in the location, which we were able to actually locate in the paperwork and the old newspapers that it actually happened. Her name was Jane Householder. I think she was 72 or 73 years old. She had gotten some bad news that day from like a caseworker or something like that.
Oh,
She
no.
went up and got in the furnace, and this was at a time where they did not have electricity. I think it was in 1928 or 1929. The building didn't even get electricity until the 50s, if memory serves me.
Whew.
And she ended up, I guess, getting in the fireplace to do something. And I don't know. There's kind of a little bit of unknown about it, but there supposedly was some kind of accelerant added to the fire, and it lit up, and it actually backed out onto her, and third and fourth degree burned her all over her body. She ended up dying 9 hours later in the location. We were able to track that down. Similarly, there was a story of a secretary, or not a secretary, a superintendent of the facility that's well known. If you track and all, you kind of look at the stories and the people that have done videos there before. There's a story of a superintendent there by the name of Henry Hummel. Henry Hummel was supposedly, and from the stories we had heard before we started investigating, a brutal, kind of tyrannical figure that ran the place with an iron fist, and he basically treated the people there, even though the majority of the people there were actually elderly. You had to work. If you were physically capable, they had wanderers and stuff as well that would come through. And if they wanted to stay there, they had to work. Well, there was a story of this Hummel being who he was. And he was outside, and he had several of his his inmates. They called to all the people, including 96-year-old people, inmates.
Wow.
He had of several people out front digging in a ditch, and I guess there was a person that wandered into the property a couple days before who was displaying signs of mental illness. And one of the other people that was on the property had reported that this wanderer had been talking about he was bloodthirsty, and he was out for blood, and he was out for violence. And apparently the story was, for many years, that Henry Hummel was beaten to death out front by this inmate with a 3-foot long iron bar. Come to find out, that's only part of the story. He actually didn't die. He was attacked with a 3-foot iron bar and was nearly beaten to death, but we were able to track down that actually didn't happen the way it was. That is part of this. The location I mentioned, Deep End Antiques, that's a location in Beckley, West Virginia. Like I said, it was built on a hotel. The building itself is a new construction building that is built directly on the old pool of the hotel. They filled the pool up with concrete, and they built a pole barn, and it has several businesses in it. It has like a flower shop, a salon, a daycare center, and this antique shop. And it's called the Deep End Antiques because it was put right over where the deep end of the pool was. And this location was reportedly a drug den, which it was, but also violence, prostitution, mob ties, so on. But also goes back to like the Civil War going through the area and stuff as well. But one of the things with this location, or one of the stories that we had heard, was that there was a little boy that drowned in the pool of the property. We looked back through the material and could not find any of this like actual definitive that happened. However, directly above this location, up on the hill, is a location called the Black Knight Country Club. And for anybody that's interested, or I'm trying to think of the name of Amy Bruni's show, Kindred Spirits. They did this Black Knight Country Club, which is directly above this location I'm talking about right now. And in that pool at that location, there was a little boy who drowned. So we can, by proxy, kind of consider maybe someone just messed up the story, and that drowning actually occurred up on the hill, and it's been falsely attributed to this location. That's one of the things that we try so desperately to do, is try to do our own research when possible to make sure before I walk into a location. A lot of people like to go into a location blank and kind of just experience. That's fine if that's what your tactic is. But our group, when you look at our logos and you look at our mission statement, we are a scientifically and historically backed group. I put a lot of emphasis on the history side because I want that information before I walk in. That way I can get a clearer picture of what is actually happening.
See, you just answered my next question. I was going to say, do you consider yourself to be scientific? Which it seems like you pretty much do. And like you said, and like he says, to the viewers, anybody or everybody has their own investigation style. Me, myself, I have different views than the rest of my team members. I want things to go a certain way, and when I adjust things, it confuses people, but that's the way I like it. Uh, I like to do some things scientific, but it all depends on the venue. Of how much history we need or how much information we need or something like that. It all depends on the case itself. But being scientific is a really good thing in the field because let me say this. There's some people out there who like to fake their evidence.
Oh yeah,
And Brian, and how well that goes over in the field. It does not
yeah.
because if you fake something, someone's going to find it and someone's going to call you out. So the best thing to do,
Especially publicly on Twitter.
Right. So the best thing to do, tell the truth. Tell the truth. Investigate the way you investigate, but just don't fake anything. And just have a good time with it. That's basically all it is. So my next thing for you is what is one or a couple other projects that you have in the works right now?
So right now we are preparing to do an Well, like I said, several of my team members are getting ready this weekend to do the Heyman House. This will be our fourth or fifth investigation. A location is highly recommended. It's been always very productive for us. It's been a very popular one for us, and it's going to be an opportunity for several members of my team to go in there for the first time that have never been there before, and it'll give them a time to train. Then in September, we are doing a location that's kind of new into the field. It's in Bel Air, Ohio. It's known as the Ross House. Cindy Ross is the owner. It's right there in the same town with Bel Air House and such. That's one's kind of coming onto the scene, so we're going to try that one.
You want some visitors?
You're welcome to.
Really? Don't tempt me.
You're welcome to. We are also kind of working. That's fine. You let me know. November 18th, we are going to be doing actually a vendor fair and paranormal convention here in Huntington, West Virginia, or at the Museum of Radio and Technology, which is our home base. Former schoolhouse built in 1928. It's a radio and technology museum. I'm a member. I've been there for years, heard stories for years. I'm on the board of directors there. We use it for our trainings, and we did it for the Global Ghost Hunt, and we are going to be doing a vendor fair and paranormal convention there. We're trying to bring people in from West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, and wherever they would like to come to kind of explore the paranormal in our location, in our kind of our backyard. And one of the things that I want to really emphasize with it is that here in the paranormal field, as you know, and as many of the people that you have watching can attest, it has been very much politicized to such a degree that there's these camps forming about this and that and so on. And I can't stand it. I really cannot stand it. I'm
right there with you, man.
It has ruined a large portion of the field for a lot of people, and that's why a lot of people have just quit, because it's people getting pushed out into the public sphere and doing all this, and you have all this jockeying for position on who's right and who's wrong. I could care less. Hey, look, I'm going to control what I can control in my group, and what we're trying to do with our vendor fair and paranormal convention, we're trying to bring attention to some of the lesser known locations in West Virginia, also trying to bring attention to the lesser known teams in West Virginia. I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything like that, but we've kind of gotten to a position where we are one of the better known organizations in the state of West Virginia, just through social media outreach and our show Locked In. and things of that
Yep.
nature. We've kind of built a little bit of a culture for ourselves. And what
Good.
I want to do is try to bring some of the other teams along for the ride and let them kind of experience it from that side as well, and kind of build up the West Virginia paranormal community together. For
Absolutely.
years, like I said, it was very disjointed and it was very hostile. And from day one, I told Teresa one of the things that I wanted to do was that, unlike those prior teams, I don't care to work with anybody. I will work with you, and if it's a new team, and we've worked with a lot of new teams with that have a lot of new members, and we've tried to train them, give them ideas, tips, tricks, etc. I will work with anybody if it comes to helping the community, and that's one of the things that we want to try to do with it. The other part of it is we desperately need some equipment upgrades, and it's a little way to kind of raise some money on that as well. So it's kind of a multitasker thing, and it's also to bring attention to the Museum of Radio and Technology here in town. It's a fantastic location that a lot of people, even in our hometown, don't know about. It's kind of tucked back into a little hollow, and there's people every day that walk in the doors from all over the country and all over our area that have never heard of it before. And I want to try to change that, because in that location, we not only have some paranormal activity, I truly believe, but also it is a location that has tens, if not hundreds of thousands of historic items that people have put a lot of attention to and a lot of faith in and a lot of pride in over years that need to be preserved. Because one of the things that we're noticing, I'm a teacher, and we live in a culture that is a throwaway culture. When something breaks, you go to Walmart and you get a new one, and that's it. That is a relic to a time where you went, and if you needed something fixed, you either did it yourself, you called somebody in, they would come in and fix it, and you could do it through that lens. It's a callback to a bygone era, and we're hoping that by bringing people in, it'll kind of expose people to the history, the paranormal, and it's kind of an all sides win event.
Absolutely. Well, this is going to be a super cool event. I'm hoping a lot of people, take advantage of it and come out and see all the great things that you guys are doing. We have Virgil from Manchester, England. Thank you for joining. Please feel free to add me on Facebook. I promise you I'm not a troll. You can easily delete me if you think I am. I believe you, and I appreciate you watching the show. Thank you very much. So, Brian, let's talk about your pre and post investigation process. When you book a investigation, when I book an investigation, first thing I do is I schedule a walkthrough, and we go and do our walkthrough, see what we're dealing with, see if it is worth an investigation, even worth taking the time to go do. And then we figure out where we're going to set up our equipment at and that kind of stuff. And then after the investigation, I review some footage, get back with the venue owner or, tenant or something like that. And, then we do the post-investigation paperwork. So do you have pre- and post-investigation process yourself?
It's pretty similar to what you mentioned. We try to do we can't always work it out to where we can get into the building beforehand, but what we typically do is we try to arrive early. What my first step is, if we are booking a location, especially if it's a location not like this one behind me, and it's not something that is extremely well known, one thing I like to do when it comes to getting the pre-steps in is interview the owner or the person that's in charge, kind of get an idea of what to expect. Have they had any experiences? Kind of just a general rundown of the history of the location. That way I can also kind of look at it deeper on my angle. I usually request things like addresses, alternate names, things of that nature. That way I can go back through the history and stuff and see if I can make correlations and see if there's a correlation causation there. Then what we typically do when we arrive on location, we try to arrive early, give ourselves a couple hours to kind of get acclimated,
Yep.
What I usually do is I have my videographer, my head videographer, Casey, Teresa, my co-founder, and usually one more person conduct interviews with the person on location that's there to help guide us. That way we can get information from them. We have
Absolutely.
already preemptively at this point already done some of the background history where we've either conducted like newspaper searches, just general historical walkthroughs, but also possibly contacted local libraries. I know when we did Fairfield County Infirmary the first time, I went up 3 hours early before we even could get in the building, and I spent time in the local history section of that library going through and looking at their books because they had a historic collection of people that had been in that building and passed away in that location. It gave me some background to kind of look at. So we've already done the preemptive at that point before we walk in the door. Then when we get in the door, one of the things that we'll try to do is try to kind of get a broad spectrum look at it and see what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Something that has helped me in the past is I usually, if it's a location that's been visited by either myself or somebody else before, I will try and watch their stuff. Now, what I'll do is I'll typically look at it and see, okay, these are some of the things that they are reporting in this location. Let me kind of view where their camera angles are. Let me kind of get an idea of what they are doing in that location to kind of help guide me, and kind of using those best practices through that to kind of get a ballpark idea of what we need to do. And then I can always kind of manipulate it and change it as we go. We get in the location, we go through our walkthrough, we did everything in place, we start our investigation, we wrap up at the end of the night. The next step for us, and something we have to do a little bit better of, and we are going to try, or we're trying to kind of get a little bit more of a process in place where I can get more people involved, because the the background, or not the background, the review process for this is a monster. As you can attest, and as most people that actually give a shit in this field, they know it's a monster to do this properly. Between audio, video, and if you have a DVR system, which we do, I don't use it entirely too much. I'm actually trying to phase it out because of setup with wires and stuff like that. I just can't stand it. But if you do that and you have a 10-hour, if you have a 10-hour investigation and you're filming for 10 hours on 8 cameras, that's 80 hours of footage to record or go through. That's you know what? And getting more people involved in that is going to be kind of the next step. I've got a lot of kind of newer folks, and I think in the next like month or two, especially after they do the Heyman this time, we are going to got to get a lot of our newer folks kind of more involved in the review process, kind of put in specific areas for people to function. We have certain people that will do audio, certain people that do video, certain people that go through and do specific things as we go through to help expedite the process. Then eventually what our plan is, or what the culmination of this all is we try and we have a little web series that we do called Locked In. It's a historic and paranormal web series. I make it very clear it's historic first, paranormal second, because I love the history element. I love going into cool, unique locations like this one behind me and just looking, let alone the paranormal side. I also just enjoy walking into these locations and kind of seeing something that is so profound and so cool that needs to be protected. So we try, what we a lot of do is we'll kind of start piecing together. We are working on a video right now on the Red Kreitz Octagon House in Circleville, Ohio. It's a fairly recent one as well that's come on the scene. It's a very cool, unique location. And we're working on putting it together and kind of doing the review for it. We've been there twice, so we have twice a review to actually do. We're mostly through with it at this point. Then putting it out, we'll give it to Tommy, who's the benefactor of the location, and let him kind of do with it as well, but also just put it out there for posterity, and anybody that wants to look at it to get ideas and critique and stuff like that, they are welcome to do so. This is not something that, how should I say this? I don't approach this with any kind of real like necessary ego.
Sure.
And if I do something wrong, I expect somebody to point it out. I expect people, like, if they have like something that they would critique or think, hey, you could have done this better or that, hey, I'll listen to it and I'll try to use it. And that's part of Locked In, is we have gradually gotten better with every piece we've done because we've taken feedback from different people and kind of tried to push it out. But the main mission of the Locked In series is to bring attention to lesser known locations and lesser known entities within the paranormal field in West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very cool. And for people out there who don't believe, I mean, there's people in each and every state and maybe each and every country who have issues and they need help with, maybe cleansing or something like that. For people who don't know who to go to, that's the reason we do these shows. And it's the reason for the questions that I ask, because we're breaking it down little by little what each and every team does. So,
Yep.
If anybody out there in West Virginia is having any issues, contact Brian, and I'm sure he can get something set up for you. So,
absolutely.
We have a question for you. I'm new to this. We don't really have this in England. Do you see ghosts or voices?
That's kind of interesting because I've talked to a lot of people from over across the pond, so to speak, and there is a paranormal community over there, but I don't think it is, what's the word I'm searching for here? I don't think it is so free to them. I think there's a lot more scrutiny put on those folks over there, and that's why you don't hear about a lot of those teams over there as much. But I know of lots of groups over there that are functioning. I think one of the things to keep in mind is that when you walk into a location, you don't really know what to expect until you start conducting interviews. And you start, basically, the first thing that I want to do when I walk into a location, especially once that person leaves, is we want to be quiet. And I want to get used to the sounds of the building. I want to get to know, like, what kind of environmental factors are there that I need to be aware of when I do an investigation. We sometimes see things. I think generally sound is more common to us, and I think across the field, I would say, if I were to break it down, I'd say 75-25 more sound than in terms of video or like visual stuff. I think sound is much more common because it falls right under the window of, what's the word I'm looking for? The recording based haunting. I'm trying to think. I don't know why it's losing me. I'm trying to think of like the playback type haunting now. I don't know why I'm not thinking of the word. Residuals, I think, really more tend to the sound side than anything.
Right.
I could not think of that word for the life of me.
It just completely skipped my head. Like, I deal with residual and the other type of energy all the time. I don't know why I didn't think of it.
Yeah.
So, Virgil, I believe myself I can see spirits more than I can hear them. To be able to hear them, equipment has been the best result for me. Seeing them, I see silhouettes, I see full body operations, I see all kinds of things. So I guess it really just depends on the person. You know what I mean?
I think sometimes it depends on the location a lot as well, because there's certain locations that sounds are more common. There's certain locations that visual things are more common. And I think when I look at it like this, I think in general, when I look at like evidence review, we get far more sound that we could possibly consider to be in the paranormal realm than the we hear a lot more sound than we do visuals. I think it's a lot more common to get sounds than it is the visual side. But I think a lot of people see a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I've caught it on film. And because of that, I can't really classify it as paranormal, other than the fact that
Absolutely.
it was something that I cannot explain at that time.
Yeah,
It's open to scrutiny, I guess, at that point.
absolutely. Well, perfect. So let's see. A couple more questions for you.
Cannot hear you, Marcus.
How about now?
I don't know what's going on. I can't hear you.
How about now?
It's weird.
Hmm.
Hang
Can
on.
you hear me now?
I don't know. I can't hear you at all. Huh.
Oh, weird. Here, I
Let
will.
me try and leave, and I'll come right back and see if that'll do it.
Sounds good to me.
You must hear me, but I can't hear you. So let me see what I can do.
All right. All right, guys. Well, while we wait on him to get that fixed, the technical difficulties, please enjoy this promotional video of Minnesota SpiritCast. Enjoy.
The hell?
All right, everybody. We are back on the ALL American Paranormal Tour, Season 4, Minnesota SpiritCast, live in the state of West Virginia with Brian Clary of SRI Investigations. Brian, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about SRI. We were talking a little bit about the state of West Virginia and the paranormal. So if I missed that, feel free to catch us on replay after we're done tonight. Brian, we have a few more questions for you afterwards.
Okay.
We'll wrap up and let you get back to your night. So Virgil says, some people don't fear the dead. It's the living who will harm you. But that isn't always true. My friend worked in a funeral home. One day, a coffin with a big guy in it slipped off the top shelf and crushed him. The pathologist said death would have been instantaneous. Boy, I missed him. Any thoughts?
That's so hard to kind of really postulate, because honestly, there's so many variables there that I would kind of have to see. What angle is the coffin at? Where was it stored? The nature of it is that I would want to be able to kind of, within reasonable suspension, be able to prove or disprove that this thing fell on its own or was actually acted upon by an outside force. So that's really kind of really a hairy and slippery slope to kind of walk, because for me anyway, and I don't like look at myself as like one of the TV investigators anyway, but I would like to have more data before I made an honest
Absolutely.
assessment of that.
Absolutely. Most definitely. And that's the best thing to do, honestly, because if you can just automatically say that it was paranormal, where's the proof that it was automatically paranormal? You got to have proof
Absolutely.
before you can document anything as paranormal. You got to lay that proof out in front of you. Because if you don't have no proof, if you didn't see it, it didn't happen. You know. So, Virgil, I'm saying it didn't happen, and I completely see what Brian's talking about. It's the fact that he would just need a little more information
Yeah.
before he would dock it as paranormal. So that's basically what he's saying.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely.
so Brian, let's ask you a few more questions here, and then we'll let you get back to your night. So we talked about what's next for SRI. Do you have a piece of advice for a newcomer in the paranormal field?
Do not go out and spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on equipment. Do not buy from any place that tells you in markets that they are selling ghost equipment, because the markup is at least 150 to 250% on any item that is marketed for ghost hunters that you can build at home, usually anyway, for a far lesser rate. Also, look at your equipment and assess absolute needs and necessities. Don't go out and buy the expensive pieces of equipment if you can't afford them. Most of the time, a simple little gear bag can be just as easy as teams that have thousands upon thousands of dollars of equipment. Absolutely not. I saw Virgil's thing there. We didn't. You weren't. I wasn't upset with Virgil at all. I just want to make that for the record. Like you said, I would need to be there to kind of get a little bit more information. That's all.
Yeah.
Other thing that I would go ahead.
It's basically one of those things where every little thing that happens during an investigation, whether you were there or not, it has to be debunked.
Yeah.
Debunking is a huge thing in paranormal investigation, especially these days. Because, like I said before, people will point out your mistakes, even if you miss it on accident. Somebody is bound to point it out. It's happened many, many times. So,
absolutely.
Is this Vicky? I'm sorry, it keeps showing Facebook users. So, if you guys go in the description of the show and click on the little link for the StreamYard thing that I put there, then it will display your name. So, I believe it's Vicky. So, thank you for coming over on Facebook. Anyway, sorry, Brian. Continue there. Oh, well. Okay. Yes, it is Vicky. So we lost him for a second, but I'm sure he'll be back. There he is.
What just happened? I have no clue.
But anyway, yeah. So it's all about the debunking. That's pretty much bottom line. So, but anyway, with your piece of advice, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
You're fine. Trying to hear you, Marcus. Let me see. Over to my phone or to my truck now. No, I hear you.
Okay, perfect. You do hear me. Okay, good. So,
I got you.
Perfect. So, so you heard a piece of advice. I mean, and this is for any newcomer in the field. And even if you're looking at, maybe changing your style or, like I'm doing, revamping my entire team, I take little pieces of advice from each of my shows and I use those pieces of advice. And that helps me in my investigations with Minnesota Spirit Hunter. And there's a lot of people that I owe huge shouts out here to, because, there's a lot of people that helped me get my team to where it was. And now I need to get it to a new spot, a spot that I'm
Absolutely.
That's all about those pieces of advice. So thank you for putting your input there. Absolutely.
One more thing before I cut you off.
Yeah.
Also, I would tell any of your listeners, do not skimp on the history element. That is that needs to be the bread and butter. That needs to be the background of any investigation that we do. because that's going to inform us on whether or not what direction we need to go in. If you skimp on that, you're not going to have a full picture of what you're doing. So it's very critical that that element be hit. That's something that's extremely important.
Absolutely. You want to check out that history for sure. Me myself, I'm a guy who believes in spiritual psychics, mediums, clairvoyance, all of that. When it comes to investigations, they don't like to know anything ahead of time. So what I like to do is I like to create a group chat between all of my members who don't have that special ability or gift. And then we'll talk about some history of the place. Or I'll just have people research, get some information, and then share it with me. But we absolutely won't let our mediums or psychics or anybody know. So it's just depending on the person about the research and the history. So
absolutely.
But, Virgil says, to be brutally honest, it wasn't going.
I wouldn't think so. I hope anyway not. Then that if that it is, that's a completely different issue we got to contend with.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess my last question for you here tonight, Brian, is where can SRI be found? I do have some links below, but we're currently streaming at.
Okay, so you can find us. Actually, our materials should be on fairly soon on what you call the new Ghost Planet Network that is available on Roku and Android and Apple devices. You can go on there and stream. I think our stuff is slated to be added onto there fairly soon. You can find us through SRI Huntington WV on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. You can find me through the Haunted Historian under Brian Clary 81 on TikTok. Kind of a wide variety of places that you can find us. If you go to SRIHuntingtonWV.com, it also links us over to a lot of our stuff as well.
Perfect. And anybody who wants to take a look, of course, you can go do what Brian just said, or go down into the description of this show and check out the links that I have below. I'm pretty sure I missed some, but I got some down there below. So, Brian, you have any questions for me, Minnesota Spirit Hunters, anything we do?
No, anytime you need somebody to talk to again, feel free to give me a shout, and I will gladly. I love talking. I love talking on these. I think it's fun. I love talking with other people in the field. So,
absolutely. Well, I couldn't thank you more for your time. You know, it's been a great show. You were at a fantastic location. It's sad that it got dark when it did, but I think it was a good show, man. I really enjoyed it, so I appreciate it very much.
All righty. Thank you, bud. I appreciate it.
No problem. We'll see you later. Have a good night.
You too, guys. Thank you.
All right. All right. See ya. Bye. All right, guys. Well, fantastic show. Go over and check out SRI Investigations in West Virginia, and show them some love. Of course, you can go to all of the things that Brian mentioned, or check out the links down below. So, that has been our commute to the state of West Virginia, which honestly is a bucket list state to go investigate in. I think it would be super cool. Don't miss us next week. We're actually going to be live in the state of Missouri with Abyss Paranormal, and that's going to take place in or on Saturday at 6 p.m. Central Time, and you're not going to want to miss it. Vicky Lerdahl makes her appearance for the first time ever on the Minnesota SpiritCast, so we're super stoked about that. So, yeah, that's all I got for you guys. So, go over, check out SRI. Keep updated on the Minnesota Spirit Hunters Facebook page because new things are coming daily. And we're just, putting out new stuff for you guys. So, super excited to get going here. But anyway, I enjoyed talking to you guys. I enjoyed talking with SRI, but that's all we got for you tonight. Until this Saturday, I hope you guys have a great night and enjoyed the show, and we'll see you later. Happy hunting.
Let's go.